how your Ansible architecture works. So, so guys, what you have to understand here is we have here Ansible engine, and this Ansible engine is going to manage some worker nodes. Okay, we call it as that worker nodes. These are your worker nodes, or even we can call it as Ansible nodes. Okay, see, understand here the machine where we are going to install Ansible. Okay, the machine where we are going to install Ansible, this machine we call it as Ansible engine or Ansible controller or even Ansible master. The machine where your Ansible engine is going to work with. Okay, the machine where your Ansible engine is going to work with. This machine we call it as worker nodes. We call this as Ansible worker nodes or Ansible nodes or worker nodes. Okay, let's say for example, we will have this machine. Okay, this machine is one particular server. Like let's say it has an IP address like uh, 192.168.12.1, something like this. And it also has some user accounts like root user is also there, and some Vignesh user is also there. Okay, some user accounts are there. Okay, yeah. Same way, this worker nodes also has a IP address. Let's say like 192 dot. So make sure all this machine should be in the same network. Only then you can able to do this 12.2. Okay. And this we have root user followed by we here also we have some user like Vignesh, for example. Okay. Same way, I also have one more machine, one more worker node that is 192, which also has an IP address 192.168.12.3. Okay. Followed by we have some user accounts like root user is there and followed by Vignesh user is also there here. Okay. So let's say here also we have this IP address 192.168.12.4. And here also we have some user accounts like root followed by Vignesh user account. Okay, so let's say maybe this host name would be something like, for example, okay, I'm giving a host name for this machine. The host name is something like maybe we call it as what? Workstation, something like this. Workstation, the host name. Okay, maybe this is the host. This host name, I'll give it like node one. Node one. Host name is nothing but the machine name. Just like how all your virtual machines is having a host name, right? Same way. Okay. So this machine also will have a host name. So this is node 2 and this is node 3. Okay. Understand this properly. So guys, so how will your Ansible engine is going to understand that these are the worker nodes it is going to work with? How it is going to understand? End of the day, in your Ansible will maintain one particular inventory file. Okay, your Ansible engine will maintain one particular inventory file. Okay, your Ansible engine will maintain one particular inventory file. Okay, it will maintain one particular inventory file. Okay, inside the inventory file, we'll write down all your managed host information. Okay, so this is your inventory file. See, this inventory file is located in your Ansible folder only. Okay, let's say for example, when you try to install Ansible package, right? So the Ansible package will be stored under etc. Under etc, we have Ansible folder. Inside this Ansible folder, you will have this inventory file. Okay, inside this Ansible folder, you will have this inventory file. So whenever you install a package, okay, inside that, when you install the package will be installed under this etc folder. We'll have this Ansible folder, and all the Ansible related files like inventory file, configuration file, all those will be stored inside this Ansible folder only. Okay, all this will be stored inside this Ansible folder only. Okay, yeah. So inside this Ansible folder, we'll have this inventory file. So in this inventory file, we'll write down your managed host information. We write down the managed host information in IP address like 192.168.12.4 to, or we'll even write down in host name. Okay, or even we'll write down in host name. So the host name is like, for example, mm, what is this? Host name is node one, right? We'll write down in host name. So either ways, you can see end of the day you have to instruct your Ansible engine telling that, hey, which are the worker nodes that we are going to connect. So how will your Ansible engine will understand that which are the worker nodes it is going to connect? Because by default in your Ansible engine, it is going to maintain one inventory file. In the inventory file, it is going to write down, it is going to manage your worker nodes, okay, with the help of this inventory file only, using the IP address or using the host name. Okay, so here we'll write down the host name, let's say like node 1, node 2, and node 3, and maybe like node 4. We write down those, okay, manage host information through IP address or through host name. Okay. And one more thing. Now, whenever this Ansible engine is there, right? Whenever it is trying to execute a task. So I told you, right? Ansible engine will be using some playbooks or some ad hoc commands to execute a task. Okay. End of the day, your Ansible engine will be using some playbooks. Okay. It will be using some playbooks. Okay. It will be using some playbooks and ad hoc commands to execute the task. Okay. To execute the task. So when it is trying to execute a task, how will my Ansible engine will understand, okay, which user I have to log in? Okay. And if I want to log into, let's say, for example, before that, guys, we have to give a SSH connection. See, before that, let's say I have to give a passwordless connection. Okay. By using SSH, I have to give a passwordless connection from, let's say, I want to do it from root to Vignesh. Okay. Maybe let's say, for example, I want to do it from root to Vignesh. See, in your whenever this root user is there, right? Whenever he's trying to execute a playbook, which means I told you Ansible works on push mechanism. So whenever he's trying to push a task to your worker nodes, so by default, from which user he is going to log in to this worker node, and from that user, which user is going to become to execute that task. All those details, all these details, okay, will be written in the configuration file. Okay, so guys, end of the day, guys, what we'll do is we'll be using this open source tool called SSH for connecting your Ansible engine to your worker nodes. So we'll be using this SSH tool, guys. We'll be using this open SSH tool for connecting your Ansible engine to your worker nodes. Okay, so we'll be connecting your Ansible engine to your worker nodes. Okay, so end of the day, we'll be using this SSH tool for connecting. Let's say, for example, now the root user of this workstation will have a passwordless connection with the Vignesh user of node 1, Vignesh user of node 2, Vignesh user of node 3. Open SSH. Okay. So now the root user of this workstation will have a passwordless communication with Vignesh user of node 1, Vignesh user of node 2, Vignesh user of node 3. So we have generated a passwordless communication. Okay. You know how to create a passwordless communication because I've explained you in during SSH. Okay. During SSH topic, I explained that. Okay. Okay. Now, guys, when this root user is trying to execute a playbook, let's say this root user is trying to execute a playbook. How will this uh, task is going to be executed over here? How come your engine will understand, okay, which are all the host machine that we are going to manage, and from that machine, which user we have to log in, and to execute the task, which user we have to switch? How come your engine will understand all those information? Because all those informations will be maintained in one particular, okay, will be maintained in one particular configuration file. Okay, all those information. So how your Ansible engine is going to connect to your worker nodes and how it is going to perform the task, all those information will be maintained in one particular configuration file. Okay, it will be maintained in one particular configuration file. So by default, I told you, right, whenever you install Ansible software, so it is going to be stored under etc. We have this Ansible folder. So under this Ansible folder, we'll have this ansible.cfg file. Okay, we'll have this configuration file, ansible.cfg file. Okay, we'll have this configuration file, ansible.cfg file. Okay, so inside this ansible.cfg file, we'll write down the information. What kind of information you'll write down? Like we'll write down the information like where your inventory file is located. So we'll write down the path of your inventory file because see, whenever you execute any task, whenever you execute any Ansible command, first your first your engine will go through this configuration file. Okay, first, your engine will go through this configuration file, and according to the instructions which is written in your configuration file only, your entire task is going to be executed. See, I told you your Ansible, your Ansible works on push mechanism. So, push mechanism in the sense, whenever you write down a task in your playbook, all those tasks are going to be pushed from your engine to your worker nodes. Okay, the tasks are going to be pushed. See, understand one more important thing. This task is not going to be executed by your engine. It is not going to do. It is just going to push the task to your worker node. End of the day, the user of this worker node only is going to execute the task. Okay, end of the day, the user of this worker node only is going to execute the task. Okay, end of the day, the user of this worker node only is going to execute. What is this engine is going to do? This engine is just going to push the task. That's it. He is just going to push. So how he is going to push? So he will first understand this configuration file because always your Ansible engine will first undergo this configuration file whenever it is trying to push a task. First, it'll understand this configuration file. In the configuration file, what are the details will be there? So we'll have some details like this. Where is that? Yeah. So typically, like 1 second. Okay. So. hmm, mm, Okay, so you'll have some details like you will see in the configuration file, you will maintain some defaults. So we have defaults and we have privilege escalation. What do you mean by defaults? What do you mean by privilege escalation? See, defaults mean we'll write down all the default information like where your inventory file is located. So my inventory file is located under like Ansible inventory. Which remote user you are going to log in your worker node. Okay, see, I told you, right? In my case, let's say in my scenario, the remote user is Vignesh user. So from root user, we are switching to the remote user of the worker node as Vignesh user. Okay, we have to write down the remote user as Vignesh user. Whether we have to ask password. See, even though guys, this root user has a passwordless communication with Vignesh user, but still for security reason, if you want to give password, if you want to ask password, you can still ask password. For security reason, you can still ask password. Okay, still for security reason, you can still ask password. Okay, like how do you ask password? Like there is an instruction like ask underscore pass. See, I've given it as false because it should not ask any kind of password. Let's say I told you, right. Let's say for example, guys, whenever this root user is trying to execute a ad hoc command or a playbook file, okay, what will happen? First, it will undergo this engine will undergo this configuration file. In the configuration file, we'll write down some information. Like we write down what kind of information we'll write down. We'll write down first. We'll write down the default section. Like okay, like where your inventory file is located. So I'll write down inventory file is located under like slash etc. We have this Ansible. Under Ansible, we have this inventory file. So this is my inventory file is located. This is where my inventory file is located. Then followed by we write down like which user you are going to log in your worker node, which remote user you are going to log in. So I write down like remote underscore user. Okay, so remote user, I'm going to log in as Vignesh user. Okay, so if you're trying to log in as Vignesh user, whether it should ask password or not. So you have to give ask underscore pass. So for making your connection, for making your communication reliable, reliable in the sense there should be no stop, I mean no breakage. So we give it by default, we give it as false only. Okay, see from root user, you're trying to switch to Vignesh user to execute your task. Okay, from root user, you're trying to switch to Vignesh user of this node one. Okay, so when you're trying to execute to the Vignesh, even though you have a passwordless communication, okay, to log in as Vignesh user without giving any password, still for security reason, you can give ask underscore pass is equal to true. If you give ask underscore pass is equal to true, it will ask you the password. But for making this communication reliable, what I'll do, I'll give ask underscore pass is equal to false. I'll give ask underscore pass is equal to false. Okay, I'll give it as ask underscore pass is equal to false. I'll give it as false. So that it is not going to ask when this root user is trying to switch to Vignesh user of this particular worker node. Okay, it is not going to ask any kind of password of this Vignesh user. Okay. Till now we understood up to here. Now to execute this task, see Vignesh is a normal user, or maybe he might be even a pseudo user. But understand one thing: if he is a normal user, he cannot run some privilege commands, right? He cannot create user because creating user is a privilege command. So that privilege command can be run only by root user, right? So let's say for example, okay, so there is a task, okay, like creating a user. So till now from root user, we have switched to Vignesh user. We understood up to here. Now to execute a task, we have to become to a root user. So for that also, we'll write down the information in the configuration file. For that also, we'll write down the information in the configuration file. Okay, we'll write down the information in the configuration file. Okay, we'll write the information in the configuration file. 1 second. Where is this? Okay, we'll write the information in the configuration file. What kind of information we'll write down here? So there is a section called privilege underscore escalation. Okay, privilege underscore escalation. So in the privilege escalation, you have to write down like, can we become to any other user? So become underscore user, you have to give it as true. Which means what do you mean by become user? Let's say from root user, you have switched to Vignesh user. That is your remote user is Vignesh. Okay. From Vignesh user, can you become to any other user? Yes, we have to become to root user, right? So I'm giving become underscore user as true. So which means we are going to become to a privileged user to execute the task. Okay, so which user you're going to become? Okay, become is equal to, I mean, we have to give become is equal to true or become underscore user. 1 second. Let me check. 1 second, 1 second. Privilege escalation in ansible.cfg file. I want to know some details of that. Okay, so understanding privilege escalation. So here it is. So I think, where is that? So we have like this. Okay, so become is equal to true. I'm so sorry, it's not become user. It's become user. You have to mention that user. It's become is equal to true, which means can we become to any other user? If you give it as true, means yes, we can become to a user. Okay, 1 second. Let me erase this. Let me write down this. So privilege underscore escalation. Okay, it should be within the square brackets only, guys. This is one more important thing. Okay, so become is equal to true, which means can we become to any other user? Yes, we have to become. And what method we are going to use to become? See, let's say from Vignesh user, if I want to switch to root user, what method it has to have, so that it should not ask me any kind of password. By default, I'll make this Vignesh user as a pseudo user. Okay, in my worker node, I would have make this Vignesh user as a pseudo user. Okay, so I would have given become underscore method is equal to pseudo method. Okay, and which user we are going to become? So become underscore user we are giving as root user. Okay, whether it should ask password or not. So become underscore user pass. I mean, sorry, ask underscore password. Ask password. I'll give it as false. Okay, see, what you have to understand here is, see, end of the day, this engine is going to just push the task. Okay, it is just going to push the task to your worker node. Okay, so for that, what will happen? It'll try to switch from root user to Vignesh user as per the configuration file details. Okay, it will understand it'll go to the inventory file. It will understand, okay, these are the worker node that it has to manage. Now it will try to switch in the worker node. It will try to switch to that particular user. I've given remote user as Vignesh. So from remote user, from root user, you'll try to switch to Vignesh user as a remote user. Okay, from Vignesh user to execute the task, which user we have to become. So in the become, I would have given like become is equal to true, which means can we become to any other user? Yes, we have to become to some other user. What method we have to use to become to that user? So by default, this Vignesh is a super user, I mean pseudo user. So you know, right? See, guys, I hope you know this basics. See, a root user can switch to any normal user without asking any kind of password. Without giving any password, root user can switch to normal user. But if a normal user wants to switch to a root user, we have to give the root user password. So that is why what I did is I'm going to make this Vignesh user as a pseudo user. Okay, manually I'll do that. You'll understand when I do the infrastructure part. You'll understand this. Okay, what we are going to do is I'm going to make this Vignesh user as a pseudo user. Okay, so that whenever it try to switch to root user, it is not going to ask me any kind of password. So that it makes the communication reliable. It is not going to break. Any kind of breakage is not going to be there. Okay, so I'm going to give become is equal to true, yes, and become method is equal to pseudo method. So this Vignesh will be using pseudo method to switch to root user. Okay, Vignesh will be using pseudo method to switch to root user. You will understand that. Okay, then which user we are going to become? So we are going to become as root user. Whether it should ask password, I'm giving as false. It should not ask any kind of password. So now what will happen? So end of the day, okay, one second. End of the day, what is going to happen here is end of the day, from root user, we have switched to Vignesh user in the worker node. Okay. From Vignesh user, we are going to become to root user to execute the task. From Vignesh user, we are going to become to root user to execute the task. From Vignesh user, we are going to become to root user to execute the task. So end of the day, the root user of this worker node only is going to execute the task. Okay. See, that is why I told you Ansible works as push mechanism. Push mechanism in the sense, see, let's say we have some task. Okay, the task is written in your playbook or in your ada commands, like creating users or creating groups or installing some packages. We'll write down in a playbook file. Okay, now this root user will execute the playbook file. He'll run the ansible commands like ansible hyphen, I mean ansible hyphen playbook, and he'll run the playbook file. So when he executes a playbook file, first this ansible engine will undergo this configuration file. First and most important thing, your Ansible engine will always undergo through this configuration file. In the configuration file, we would have written where your inventory file is located. And according to that, it will go to the inventory file and it will try to see all your worker nodes information. And now in your worker node, which user we have to become. So which remote user we have to log in. So we have to log in as Vignesh. So by default, we have to do a SSH connection, guys. This is important. See, your Ansible engine is going to connect to your worker node with the help of this SSH tool only. With the help of this SSH tool only, it is going to connect or it's going to communicate. Okay. Yeah. So now from root user, we are trying to switch to Vignesh user in all the worker nodes. From there, we are going to become to root user to execute your task. Okay, so this is all about your Ansible architecture, guys. Okay, so I hope it's clear here. Any doubts in the architecture part? Yes. Any doubts in the architecture parts, guys?
No doubt. I'm curious about how the interface when we where we have to run all these syntaxes looks like.
Yes. That's what. Everything is going to be run on your engine. Okay,
Okay.
everything is going to run on engine. That is why I told you Ansible is agentless. Agentless in the sense, if you install your Ansible engine, I mean, if you install Ansible software in your Ansible engine, that is more than enough. You don't have to install Ansible software in your worker nodes. It is not required.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. It's clear, right? So anyway, guys,
Yes.
in the next
Yeah.
class, I'll be showing you the complete architecture. Okay, we'll start working on hands-on. Okay, I'll try to. So make sure you try to have a two or three virtual machine so that you can make one virtual machine as a Ansible engine, another two virtual machine as a worker nodes. Okay, so you can clearly understand how actually things are working on. Okay, so
Okay.
this is all about the architecture, guys. I hope this should be clear here. In the next class, we'll be going with the installation part. Okay.
Okay.
That's it for today's session, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.